Hoodoo plant mamas, get your soul fed and your spirit red.
This here ain't no trend. I possess the power from way back when folk was stripped from all of their kin, so they had to find the magic within. So I got on my ancestors and gather my herbs. I conjure at my altar. Voodoo plant mama. I manifest growth and I release trauma.
Child, we just out here trying to water our plants and mind our business, you know? Everybody ain't from the deep south, man. Everybody can't have culture like us.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Hoodoo Plant Mamas. I'm your co-host Leah Nicole.
And I'm Dani B.
And today we are joined by the wonderful Julia Mallory. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Introductions are so hard for me. I consider myself a storyteller whose foundational creative love language is poetry. And I'm just a creative person that's out here trying to do the most and do work that feels important and timely. So I'm excited to be back with y'all. I love talking to y'all. Y'all one of my favorite podcasts.
We're excited to have you back and to chat today.
So, Dani B, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing okay. So I went to the farmer's market yesterday and I got some mead wine. I had never heard of that. I don't know if y'all have heard of it. It's basically wine made with fermented honey and fruit. And apparently, since honey is a more concentrated type of sugar, it ends up being a stronger kind of wine, which I did not know. And I should have known when I took a sample and I was walking away to go, look at the rest of the market. I was like, wait a minute. Felt a little woozy for a second. Like I only had 2 small samples. So anyway, I drank that last night. It was a pretty small bottle. So I'm I don't know if it's hungover, but it's like that fogginess you feel after. And I don't drink a lot, but I was like, I want to drink this wine and relax tonight. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling. Foggy. That was a long-winded. But I'm feeling foggy. I'm feeling foggy today.
I'm gonna say kind of similar. I also last night was like, I need to relax. And so someone gave us some recreational some recreational products, and I was engaging in those last night. So, Julia, how are you doing?
I feel really good. We gathered yesterday to watch a film to kick off the study circle that I'm trying to put together. And so it's always good to gather with Black folks and share our strong opinions and laugh and eat. So I feel really grateful today and just being able to go at a slow pace today.
Well, let's get into some gratitude. Let's start with Julia. What are you thankful for today?
A slower pace. That's what I'm grateful for, to be honest. Just moving at my own pace, which is Sunday slow.
What about you, Leah?
I would say, and I think this is on theme for today, I am grateful for creativity and I'm grateful for the project that I'm working on. I'm working on book 3 of my series and I'm 20,000 words in and I'm having a lot of fun. So I'm just trying to remember that like this is supposed to be fun, don't stress out, do my best. So, what are you grateful for, Dani?
I'm grateful for community, and I know it's an overused word, but I just been thinking a lot about that for myself and just how I've been lucky in that respect of being connected with people who have held all parts of me as I've grown and sort of supporting that growth. And I guess I'm beginning to see sort of a like transformation that I'm been going through and just how it just wouldn't have been possible without the people near and far that I've connected with, whether they have like actually spoken to me or have just been an example for me about what life can look like when you stop holding yourself back in particular ways. So I'm really thankful for that today. So today we really want to talk about creativity. This was inspired because a while back I actually reached out to you, Julia, for advice on experimenting with different creative genres because I was having what I thought to be a creative block with my writing. And one of the things you said was a creative's life will go through many seasons, and that sometimes it's a matter of, is this a season asking you to engage with your life as a work of art and finding more experiences for connection and expression that don't just seek to be a finite thing that can be on a page and be published. And these are your words verbatim. This idea of making our lives a living work of art really struck me. And it's something that I realized I was not and am still struggling to do, like engaging with my life as a creative thing, as art. And I think about it often. I've actually thought about it probably multiple times a week since that conversation. And I'm interested to know from your perspective, what does or can that look like, and what has it looked like for you?
So this is going to be the example of like when your words come back to haunt you, because I think I probably could speak so freely about it because it's also a vice that I also need. It's so interesting. I literally just had a conversation yesterday for another podcast, and they were asking me, how do I balance out being a creative person while also making space for connection and for other people, like displaying and curating other people's work. And I was like, wow, I feel like there's a difference between making art and making a life. I'm going to repeat those words here. Like, I think there is something about our work is, yes, to do these things and put them out into the world, but balancing out that need of curiosity and connection is something that I'm always working through, because I'm always curious. I always want to know the world around me. I want to read things. And then it's just this habit of, but at the same time, and it's been a struggle to be quite honest about, making life look like a work of art since the pandemic, because the pandemic was an incredibly difficult time, but it was also an incredibly generative time for me. Just the isolation and a slower pace and stillness generated a lot for me. But at the same time, now I find that I'm struggling to connect and be outside in the way that used to feel very comfortable to me. And so I sometimes see myself as like, oh, I'm in a movie, I'm in a short film. And then, like, from the time I wake up and maybe I brush my teeth, I'm like, oh, there's a soundtrack playing in my head. And I also work remote, I'm always at the house. So I think I've just been trying to figure out, how can I stay open to like enchantment, like allowing things like surprises, maybe taking an alternate route, or pushing myself a little bit more to have maybe conversations or moments of connection that I would have just been like, I'm too busy to do this. So those are just some things that I've been trying to work through, but I know it's not easy. It's not an easy thing when we feel like we have such limited time and everything is swallowed up by having to produce something or needing to make money. I'm just leaving space. I don't know. Like, whatever that looks like is how I think I'm trying to reclaim some of that.
I'm curious about you too, Leah, as somebody who I sort of see both you and Julia in the same way, in that y'all have both sort of y'all, I mean, everybody here is a writer, but the way y'all have taken initiative and created your work by your means, like without compromise. And I know that Julia has also been a source of inspiration for you as you go through that process, but like, do you think about your life as a work of art, or is that something you've considered, or like how do you practice creativity in just like your living, your everyday living?
I do consider my life a work of art. And I think a lot of times for me, especially with the things I produce, like Julia said, I think it can be hard when you're thinking about money and when you're thinking about the algorithm and constantly produce, produce, produce. But I think for me, my struggle a lot of times comes from the fact that I don't like producing without a purpose. And so I don't like the idea of just posting content to post the content. Like, I want everything that I create to mean something, and I want it to help somebody. I want it to do some other function besides just existing. And maybe I want too much. Like, I think, some things are fine existing on their own, but I think for me personally, if I'm going to put all of this work and energy into something and offering it to someone else, I do want it to be my best, and I want it to be something worthwhile. Like, I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want to waste my time.
That makes sense. Another thing we discussed during that same conversation was about like how sometimes a story or idea is supposed to be in a container beyond the one we're trying to put it in or force it in. When or if you run into this issue, what has been your process of figuring out, because you work with many genres, and so when the way you described it during the conversation, like when a story chooses you, how do you work through sort of figuring out what container it's supposed to be in?
It's probably more so orchestrated by the story's refusal to fit where I'm putting it that lets me know. It's rarely, I don't think I'm usually coming to the table like, oh yes, this story wants to be a play. Um and then as I'm working through it, I just intuitively know like, oh no, it's not working. There's usually something more orchestrated by the work that tells me no, this does not fit. It's less of a like I'm just so wise that I just work in all these genres and I know. It usually doesn't work like that. It's usually just the story either is like I have two key examples that I can use. So when I first started working with the book that will become later Survivor's Guilt, when I'm talking about, the whole point of writing Survivor's Guilt was to crystallize my experience after losing my oldest son, Julian, in 2017. And to be honest, y'all, the first book that I was trying to write was a book about maybe how like animals and insects grieve. And then I was going to try to somehow tie that back to the human grief experience. But that is the book that was absolutely not interested in me writing it. It was like I would like have these mini starts and stops, but I think now in hindsight I realized I was feeling like I was opening, as somebody who did not really talk and process their emotions in a very public way. I thought I was being very expansive, but I think I was trying to put too much distance between me, myself, and my own personal experience with grief. So that's why I wanted to put it into like another species, and that just wasn't working. So the work itself, I think, was just resisting it. It was just like, no, thank you. This is not your story to tell or frame it this way. Then when I was writing, and this is something that's a little bit more generative, but I was writing, and Leah, you and I are both public, and I think Dani, you might have been an editor for that story, for Sis Stories, Bell's Boy. When I was writing Bell's Boy, which is a story that is like rooted in like family folklore for me, I'm writing this story, and at some point I hear like this voice that is, because it's, I'm using like ancestors names and this storyline that happened in my family. And at some point I basically get word, it's like, we're gonna give you this story, but we want to speak for ourselves. And it was like, this should also be a play. Like they wanted the opportunity to kind of talk more and have their dialogue in their story in their own words be more centered. So that is kind of how it's come to me usually when it should be something else. Now there's like two processes to that. That's like already having an idea, and then there's how have I expanded into different creative lanes. And I always reference Toni K. Bambara, who in one essay says, that she was back to the paints again because she needed a new creative language to express herself in. And so I think there's kind of like the big, like you're already like working on the work. And then there's the other side of that, which is there are things that you want to bring through, but you're feeling like what you're already working in just can't hold it. And so you got to use a different container to work through. So I find I've been obviously on both sides of those experiences.
So I remember last year when my debut short story collection came out, Apocalypse Steel, and I cited you as one of my inspirations on our Patreon because I had seen your career and how you just put yourself out there. Whatever you want to do, you do it. You don't wait for other people's approval. And so I was like, I'm going to do this with this short story collection because I feel very confident about it. And so I'll never forget when you told me that sometimes you just need one person to believe in you, and that one person can be yourself. And that's been really helpful for me, especially because sometimes I don't be wanting to believe in myself. But yeah, I can be the one person, I can be the validation that I need. And so I'm wondering if you would say that that has been your mantra for your creative life, and how has believing in yourself impacted your creativity?
And Leah, I just have to say, it has been incredible to watch you like generating your works and putting them out in the world. I think it is so dope. And I'm always gonna cheer for folks who put themselves on. Like, that's just a huge part of my belief system. And so the belief in self is so fascinating. And I know that we all have different narratives and stories that are in our heads about ourselves, and when does that enter? Because you could be raised very self assured, and then you get out in the world, and then the world makes you doubt yourself. You could be raised the opposite, where folks didn't really believe in you, but then the world got out here and made you feel like you belong. So I think we all have to navigate that. But I think from such a young age, I think my family just supported my ideas of self grandeur and just have been very encouraging. And even when they don't understand, I will have to say, because I don't think my family now understands most of what I'm doing or what I'm into. I'm doing a whole lot too. So just expecting people to always be able to be like, me and my significant other laugh about this all the time, because I'm like, okay, babe, I have this coming up. And he's like, well, oh, I kind of remember that. And I was like, listen, I really do not expect you to, there's just no way. Like, unless I have share my calendar with you, there's just no way to keep track of everything. But I think the belief in self is, I just feel like the things didn't come to you for, they came to us for a reason. They came to us for a reason. And I'm not saying that the work, just because it comes to us, is perfect out the gate. But I think not being willing to try it out, I think that's a disservice to the energy that brought it through you. And I got to be honest, a lot of the early work that I generated, I felt very connected to it being like a divine download. And so I think that also gave me a certain self-assuredness that, oh, I'm not finna debate with people about its validity. Well, my people gave this to me. You can't even earthly understand some of this. I'm not even, it just seems wild to me. And I think the more that I grow as a creative, one of the things when I was young, I always loved to read magazines and profiles about people and how they got to where they were getting to. And I'm not going to lie, sometimes I'll be looking and I'll be like, oh, okay, I see why things happen for them, because they had access to X, Y, and Z. So me comparing it, as a hood born poor girl, I'm just like, is it going to shake for me the same way, because I don't maybe have access to those resources? And so I'm saying that to say that I think in the modern world, looking at things and how people get to where they're going, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we could compare ourselves to 1,000 people. We all going to have our own unique journey, right? And so the reason why I brought up the profiles is because the more that I read about people's work and I see how people are creatively connected across different spaces, I think there's a real practical thing about people just being honest about their preferences and their taste and what they like and why they like it. And I just want Black creative folk to not be so worn out about the idea when they're not people's pick, because people are always making choices about what they like for a variety of arbitrary reasons. And so, if you are only going to let your creativity shine the moment when just somebody finds an arbitrary reason to like your work, I mean, that seems to be a very limited creative life, quite frankly. Folks like what they like. And I think that's why also creative community is important, right? Because we need people that are connected to us to even understand why we do our work. I know there's this big push to be honest with people about their work, because if we don't critique each other, it will never get better. Okay, I hear that. But some of us, I think there's also reasons why people create it the way that they do it sometimes. And sometimes it just is not for us. And I think that sometimes as artists and creatives, we might get caught up in that about why people may not resonate with it. But our work can also build an audience. Our work can also connect us across space and time with other folks. So sometimes even that's why creative community is important, because maybe people need to hear it in your voice. it's only but so many themes in life, y'all. We know this. But maybe somebody needs to hear it in your voice. There's a particular word that may unlock a memory. Maybe I never heard nobody use that sentence or that phrase. My auntie used to say it like this. And when I read your work, it just reminded me of her. Different things, that's why I think it's so important for us to just be clear about why we're doing the work that we're doing. And it is scary to put your work out in the world and to take your hands up off of it. Like, I don't disagree with that. I'm not trying to minimize that, because there's definitely times, I still have self-doubt. I still can get scared. My voice will still shake. I still have self-doubt. I'll put something out and I'll read it and I'll be like, damn, I should have changed that. And it's like, but girl, what? What's done is what's done. People are going to take it as a whole. You know what I mean? Hopefully somebody's not going to hyperfixate on the thing. And if they did, that's fine. Because there was a point where I loved it enough to release it out into the world. Baby, even if you don't believe in yourself, child, believe in the work. Like, you're going to have to pick one or other. Like, if you don't believe in the work, believe in yourself. Okay, enough to put the work out in the world. If you don't believe in the work, then believe in yourself, that like, oh, I trust myself, so this must be good because it's an extension of me. Whatever you do, what's that song say? I don't care how you get here, just make sure you get here, or something like that. Like, I'm butchering the lyric, but that's how I feel about our creative work, our creative labor. I don't care how you get there. You know what I mean? I don't care how the work gets done, child. Like, but make sure that the work gets there. Make sure that the work is out in the world, outside of yourself, because I always talk about, too, to me, some of the worst repressed energy is repressed creative energy, because we think that's benign. You know what I mean? I think we recognize like certain other type of repression in ourselves, but repressed creative energy, we just think it's like, oh, it's just a thing that I didn't get to do. But after doing that, child, for so long, the 120 Morrison line, she's like, oh, just like any person, like any was any person without art, or
I
art.
think an artist without tools.
Yeah, just like any artist without the tools or something, she became dangerous.
Yeah.
And listen, when we say dangerous, I don't think that's what we mean. That's not what we mean.
The point you made about sort of waiting to be chosen to like really lean into your work, it kind of reminds me of this conversation around Doechii, who I wasn't like, I want to preface this with, I wasn't no super follower of Doechii. I was aware of Doechii though before she began to have her moment, like a lot of people do, um, where they're underground for a while and then suddenly the mainstream wants to like elevate them for whatever reason. And I was thinking about that because so many Black artists, especially Black women, Black queer artists, they really have to know that they are that girl regardless. And a lot of them do. Like, it did take being mainstream. Like, I think about Doechii, I think about the City Girls before they kind of had their moment, Megan the Stallion. I feel like that's important. That's an important thing to think about, like really knowing that you are who you are before somebody tells you. And I feel like a lot of people really underestimate that. And also when they don't see that, like with Doechii saying she's an industry plant, which is a whole nother thing. Because they believe that that's what it takes to believe in yourself, like they can't imagine that like this person already knew who she was. Like she knew what she's doing is important, what she's doing is impactful, and that her art is impactful before somebody at the top decided, let's give that one some airtime. So yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that, and just like the so much work people have to put in that other people don't see, and assume whatever they want to assume, not knowing that you have been working like you were this person before, and if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And that's what I also try to tell people too, just from my personal experience, being aspirational and trying to put myself in the right rooms without any work to demonstrate the commitment to my creativity, it didn't do anything. So I think that's why I'm always encouraging people, like what we say, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready. And so folks want to do things, and we want the accolades and we want the attention, and people want to be writers, baby, but are you writing? Like, are you writing? Are you just making your art? Like, are you already committing the belief in self or the commitment to the work? It got to be one or the other, or like hopefully it's both. So I think this idea of And I got it from a very practical standpoint. Y'all know I'm really, really rooted in my local community too. And I gotta be honest, there are things that I wanted to do. And when you reach out to people and if they didn't see no evidence of it, like people really do spin you. They'll play nice in your face and then they just kind of never connect back with you. It's a lot of people that I used to reach out to wanting to work with, etc., that never really gave me the time of day, that now I don't really do a lot of reaching no more. People are constantly contacting me for connection because the work is out in the world working. And so that's why I always encourage people too, especially people that want a lot of visibility with their careers. It's like, baby, if you ain't got no work, like if you not doing the thing, and I always will tell people too, I am definitely a student of the Black arts movement, and I take a lot of cues from Southern rappers who a lot of times were not getting distribution deals, who ran the numbers and said it was not good, and they were selling work out their trunk, out the mom and pop stores. Like that was their distribution. So I always like Black arts movement, like the industry as a whole was not trying to publish Black folks' work, right? So then we have Third World Press, we have Broadside Press, like people who are setting up ways to put out Black work into the world, and they are taking the means of production and doing what they can with what they have, and building the careers of the poets and the writers' names who we still call today. And so instead of waiting for 50 years for publishing to finally catch up, no, they said, what can we do with what we have? So even like, okay, I might put some work out in the world. It may not be perfect. And I will also say, I know there's more than one way to have a writing career. So respect to folks who get it how they get it. But I also know like people really do try to come down for folks who are self-published and who are independently putting work out in the world, which is interesting to me because it's like y'all don't like everything that's traditionally published. Why are we catching more flack? Like y'all don't like all the books that just because they came through one of the top 5. Like, no. So I'm gonna push against that every single time. And I think people are also expecting, if you don't have a deal or if you don't have these things, they're not even really expecting humility. They're requiring a certain type of modesty. And I'm like, I just met you. You've been waiting 10 years to get a deal. I've put out 6 books. You can't talk to me like, what? I've been working. You know what I'm saying? Like I've been in my hood. People got my books on their shelves. You just can't talk to me like I'm nobody. And I hate that we also even do that to each other. So it makes sense to me to look like when you brought the music and bring, Dolce, and it just made me like, oh yeah, because these people already had motion. You know what I'm saying? She already had motion. So when they see you got the followers, they see you already have the clout with an audience, then you become more valuable to them. But then sometimes like some folks feel like, well, damn, I'm already been doing the work. Like, what do I really need y'all for? Right. Now, don't get me wrong, if it comes with some, certain type of access and maybe money, I can understand why it's attractive. But that's why I'm always like, there's so many avenues to put your work out into the world. It's only so many times that I want to hear that it didn't get picked up. That can't just be your story. You know what I mean? You wrote that thing 10 years ago and it ain't find a home yet. And so then what? It just died? It's just died? Like, that's wild. Like, absolutely not. There's too many opportunities and options for us to put our work into the world, whether that's, small literary journals, whether that's, I'm not even going to list them all because everybody knows that, like, hell, on a blog, you can make a text-based essay and post them pictures on Instagram, you know. But I think we also have to interrogate who we trying to be seen by and why does it matter if they see us, right? And so once I realized, like, oh no, I just want my work out in the world because it seems important and I feel like I have something to say, I think that was enough for me. That was enough for me. And even there's times I'm just like, oh, should I try to do something? I'm just like, girl, there's a lot of ways to get here. So my words come back to haunt me too. It's like I have to remind myself, like sometimes you have to remind yourself, girl, who are you and who are you not? For sure.
There's so much that I want to respond to. Oh my God. But I definitely agree with you. I feel like a lot of people look down on self-publishing because they kind of feel like we're cheating. Like, oh, you're supposed to submit yourself to the system. You're supposed to wait to get chosen. You're supposed to do all these things. And like you, I knew this woman who had 14 books before she had a book that was finally picked. And I was like, I refuse to believe all 14 of those books are trash. Like, I think that a lot of it was just like, oh, publishing doesn't want these things for whatever reason. They were probably racist because she was a Black woman. I was like, honestly. So I'm like, I refuse to believe that like what you're producing is bad and does not have a purpose just because the traditional publishing industry does not have a space for it. And in addition to that, I think a lot of people who are not producing, like you say, who see other people out in the world who are doing their work and they're like, oh, I want these accolades, but I don't want to do the work. I think it's perfectionism that's holding them back, but more specifically, I think it's this fear that they're going to produce something that's flawed. And we have been told that things that are flawed should not exist, that we have been told things that are flawed are not worthy of love, right? And so I think a lot of people are really afraid of producing flawed work and people criticizing for them because people are also very hypercritical. And the amount of times I see readers who are like, I hate every book I read, and I'm like, I don't think every book you read is bad. Like, I maybe they have some problems, but I don't think everything you read is bad. I don't think every book out there is terrible. I think there's a lot of good, and I think there's some things that you may not enjoy, but like, I just really don't like this conversation of like, especially with Black people, this idea that only our best should be front and center. And I'm not saying Black mediocrity, but I am saying like sometimes where you are at is enough. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be excellent. You don't have to be the best.
So something around the perfectionism, and I've heard this discussion a lot about traditional publishing too, because the idea is that, oh, well, you went through a process, so therefore it made the work better, which is so interesting because I listen to writers over the span of their career, and I hear how writers will say, I had to make all these concessions. Artists, whoever, people talking about how they have to make all these concessions so that they can get to finally do the thing that they feel like they've been compelled to do. The industry now finally respects them enough to let them talk in their own voice. And that's intriguing to me. The struggle that I have too is also, how do we maintain our creativity under capitalism that creates arbitrary scarcity? Because people are always like, oh, there's enough out here for everybody. And I'm like, in what way? Capitalism creates a system where we don't have access to the enough for everybody. And then also, if creativity is not commodified, then it also probably becomes a thing where you don't have super winners. We have like extremes under capitalism too. So people that are getting really, really lush opportunities, and then people who are not, right? Even though both of them could be equally as talented. But if we only look at what capitalism is rewarding, we also, again, we start to let that shape what we think is actually good. The conversation around mediocrity and critique and excellence, it's so nuanced. It's so nuanced because I think, can a work ever be perfect? When I think of perfectionism, I just think of sterile, to be quite honest. What I would call something perfect is just something that just hit me in all the right places. Like, to me, that, and that's not even like, oh, maybe there was some missing periods or some whatever, but it's like I was all up in the work and it was all up in me. And that is perfect. Like, God, we say, oh, you're so perfect, right? We don't mean that the person is like without flaw. It's just like what you're offering is so full. So I think even the definition around it, oh, the mediocre part. Oh my goodness. I have to be honest. I'm watching this in real time because, I'm also trying to be, I'm a like aspirational cultural writer in some respects. And then like, so I'm studying that lane across like the last 30, 40 years. And Black people have been saying the same thing, child, for decades. We always saying the same thing. People been saying, oh, the work ain't good enough. Y'all need to do better work. And then Black people saying, oh, well, I have limitations. Like it's always, we've been saying the same thing for decades. And so that's why, even I think, again, when I watch who people were critiquing and who their favorites are, And when I see the inconsistency of that manifest in the discussions that they put out in the world, I'm like, yeah, I really don't trust what y'all say. I just got to be honest. And that's why I'm like, but really, as an artist, none of that shit ain't my business. Like, and I think some of us get too caught up in it too. Sometimes we too invested in everything that's happening outside of our work because I think we're also looking for permission in other ways. Like, make the work the main thing. Somebody gonna love it, somebody gonna hate it. Did you sincerely like it? You know, I was talking to my significant other about that this morning, about art and talent. And if you as an artist no longer feel the thing, it's not even about if it's good or not. Just, did you feel it? Did you feel it? Like, that has to mean something. Like, I think that's, are you bringing sincerity to what you're putting out in the world? Because then I also think if you had to defend it, then I think you can credibly do that because you can talk from a place of sincerity of what the limitations were. Dani, remember when I put out Bell's Boy, and I remember there was a part in the dialogue and you said, Julia, I just feel like this just gets too fast or something, or like something's missing here. And I was like, you know what? People have read the story. I haven't gotten that feedback, but I also don't disagree with you, but I also don't think I know how to fix it. So it's like, oh, but because I sincerely believed in the work, I can also sincerely be like, but something ain't registering for me of how to remedy a thing that doesn't quite feel like a problem, but I could understand you as a reader, how you might register it, right? And I think that's because I'm sincerely invested in that story. So I think if we are sincerely doing our work too, like sometimes that shit just gonna have to be, it's gonna have to be enough. It's gonna have to be enough, y'all. Like, also, it's an industry, but like, I'm doing work that just feels important. Like, whether it fits inside of an industry or not. I don't know. I think that's a challenge too. I also still have a 9 to 5. So I am precious about my work in a certain type of way because I'm just like, oh, I have other means to pay my bills too. So I think maybe people who are depending on that income specifically from the art that they generate, they might have to make a set of different decisions too. So I think there's just a lot of layers here, but don't none of it ain't none of it worth talking about if there ain't no work that's produced from a sincere place.
I know we got to take a break. But I wanted to mention around the publishing and having to make concessions, because an essay that I'm always going to recommend is You Are the Second Person by Kiese Layman, because, people see him as like this super big deal writer, which he is, but he got stuck in a nightmare with trying to be traditionally published, to the point of a person trying to make him change a character to a white person. I think to a white woman, if I'm not mistaken. Basically take the essence of the work, just completely obliterate it. Take out the Mississippi, take out the blackness, the southernness. That's the work. That's the work that he's doing. That essay is always so devastating for me because I can't believe how long he was stuck, where somebody literally shelved his book pretty much and started pushing other people. And he had to just take it. And thank God he didn't bend. He refused to bend on this work. And now, he was able to like buy that book back. Like, you know what I mean? And it is a cost when you don't bend to that. But I feel like in the long run, it's worth it. It's worth it not to compromise on your work. And there's something really, to me, noble. And this is something it took me a long time to get to, because I used to feel like being chosen was the way. That's been a struggle. That's been the major thing that has been blocking me creatively, or that has. Um, but the fact that people are like, no, I'm publishing this book. I know that you, even with you, Leah, like you experience a lot of rejection around books and that kind of thing. And the fact that you said, you know what, enough, enough. Y'all are putting out self-published books that are comparable to books that are receiving these $100,000 advances, but people really put value in that and assume that somehow the work is lower quality because some white man didn't put his signature on the fact that, like, we can give you this check for us to push this book. Like, I don't know. I ain't gonna go on a rant, but I'm just saying, like, sometimes it upsets me to be reading like really great work that is not invested in, and also the fact that other people don't really understand that, like, having a machine behind you does not automatically mean that your shit is like high quality or that it's good. And I know it's subjective, art, whatever, but I'm saying people assume that people who don't have the machine, that their work is not good, and that's just not the case, especially for Black people. Okay.
Cousin Key is a huge inspiration for me. Like, and I know that the way that he was hustling his books too, when the rejection came or when folks were not trying to honor what was uniquely created by him. Like I said, I ain't mad at folks. Like, get it how you live. But when we talk about like having the machine behind you, I'm not gonna lie. Like, the machine is my people. Like, the machine is the community connections, the folks that believe in the work, the folks that are buying the book, the folks that are, I would, like, my car at one point was like a distribution center, you know what I mean? So I would be at the gas stations. I'm like, oh, you got them books on you? I absolutely do. Like, that's the machine, you know? And then also, like I said, just paying attention. All these devastating stories that come up out of the publishing industry of folks who thought they were chosen and then conveniently discarded when it no longer fits the image that the publishing lane wants to uphold. Nah, my work can't just be temperamental. It just can't.
We can take a break if you're ready.
Yes.
Let's get into some ways you can support the Hoodoo Plant Mamas. One is through our bookshop, where you can buy the books that we previously discussed with our Writing the Spirit guests. We also have a Hoodoo Beginner's Guide, as well as our top reading picks. We also have our top tarot cards and oracle card deck section, so check that out too. You can also buy Leah's books on Bookshop. Every purchase you make helps support our show. Check us out at bookshop.org/shop/Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or hit the link in our show notes. Other ways you can support us include rating and reviewing the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. We are no longer on the app formerly known as Twitter. So, yeah.
You can also check out our Patreon, where we share exclusive video, plant, and spiritual content for only $3 a month. If you prefer a one-time donation, you can donate via Cashapp, #Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or our PayPal, hoodooplantmamas@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show. So in the second half, we wanted to talk about how you have taken like this creative process as a writer and kind of expanded it, because you have a lot of titles. You're an author, you're a collage artist, a filmmaker, a poet, a facilitator, a grief worker, you're a small business owner with 1006, and you're also a Reiki practitioner. And I'm very interested in Reiki. I don't know a lot about it. So I was wondering if you could talk about your journey into Reiki, as well as walk us through what a session looks like.
So I had always, and when I say always, I mean there was a period in my life where I had heard the term, and I just was not as familiar. And one of the people that I really knew that practiced it locally was a white woman, and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Never really thought much about it, to be honest. And then in 2018, I went to an event for women of the African diaspora they had used Howard Law's space. I think it was like maybe over the summer break or something. So no one wasn't necessarily in the space. And there were like all these different little sessions. And then one of the things you can go take part in, people were offering, there was 2 Black women, they were offering mini Reiki sessions. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go try that today. So I didn't have my first Reiki session until 2018. And it was from an Afro-Colombian woman named Maria. I'll never forget her. It just changed something in me. Just the experience, just I felt like all this energy was just being transmuted in my body, and the things, the visions that I was seeing and the colors. I just was like, I want to experience this again. Like, I want to learn more about this. And also just the feeling of ease that I felt in my body. And at that point, I was a year out from the death of my son, and I was like, wow, like what if Reiki could be a healing tool for me for grief that can help like soothe my nervous system. And so when I came back home, a little bit of time had passed, and I was like, wait, I think there's a Black woman that I know locally that had a metaphysics shop. And at that time, I was also working on my book, Breathe, about meditation, a children's book about a little boy that meditates with his dad. And I can't remember if she contacted me because she heard about the book, or if I contacted her because I knew that she was like a Black person that was into metaphysics and meditation. But anywho, long story short, we met up at some point in October 2018, and I found out that she was a Reiki master, and I asked her if she would be willing to attune me so that I could then practice Reiki. I was really interested in using it as a tool to continue to heal myself through grief, but also maybe offer it to other folks that needed it. So I've been practicing Reiki since late fall of 2018. So that's how I initially arrived to that space.
And for people that don't really know what it is, I'm still kind of learning or trying to understand, but can you walk us through what it is and how a session might look like?
So walking folks through what a session is like for Reiki. Around 2019, I had reached out to this Black woman folk herbalist, and then I found out that she also was an energy worker or a Reiki practitioner. And so me and my significant other, we went to visit her in another city to get treatments. And I learned a lot from her technique. Her name is Des. And I think my practice is also informed, to be quite frank with y'all. So Reiki is using light touch to transmute energy in the body. Some folks don't like actually touch the person that is getting a Reiki session. For me, I do touch. I am like a hands on, but I will say that I also believe that my approach to the work is out of a tradition of Black hand healers. So that's why sometimes I say I'm a Reiki practitioner for sure, because I also think that's what people recognize. I think people recognize that terminology, and that is how I arrived, to this work. But I know that hand healing is something that is in a lot of cultures, particularly Black culture. And so I consider myself to be a Black hand healer. When folks come to me for a session, I have like a little form that I send people. I like to kind of know why people want to come. And when people come, we talk about we kind of like a little session in the beginning, trying to figure out how I can add my intention to theirs during our session. And after that process, I use people usually I have a massage table, and people lay on that table face up, like they lay on their back. And then obviously if people have other types of physical abilities, we can do things in an alternative fashion as well, just so that people are comfortable. And I usually start at the top of the head, and I make my way across the body. You remain fully clothed. I ask people to take off their shoes. I intuitively apply light touch on the top of the clothing, and I make my way from the top of the head down to the bottom of the feet. I will play, for some of my clients, I do curate like a special playlist depending on maybe what like I know about why they're coming, and I will play like instrumental music. Sometimes I might also do like a little bit of aromatherapy, like have some sort of fragrance or something going, but not always. And then the session can takes roughly for me about 30 minutes when I actually start. But a full session, people usually come in, it's usually about an hour for the session. 90% of everybody that has come to see me so far, they usually, at a bare minimum, they enter into a deep meditative state. And if not, they just outright like fall asleep. Like they kind of are so relaxed that they fall asleep. All different things come up. Sometimes it's memories, sometimes it's just color, sometimes it's visions, sometimes it's just a state of tranquility that maybe unlocks some things for folks. I will say I also have people come that have physical pain. So people come sometimes because they might have psychic pain or being spirit, like social, like emotional crisis, or but sometimes people literally just have physical pain, right? Like I have somebody that came and they injured their knee. I have clients that might have different things going on and they feel their body just feels, I've heard their body just feels so much better after they come for a session.
Yeah, I love that. I like the mention of like hand healing because that's something that if you grew up in church, especially a black church, that you witnessed. Even when people get the spirit or catch the Holy Ghost, just someone will be behind them, touching them or holding them. Sometimes a person will just be standing there crying, and a group of women. Sometimes it's ushers come, but also other older women in the church come and get in a circle, and everybody's touching the person. Sometimes, and some people are praying, some people are crying with them, that kind of thing. And so, that's just such a good point, and it's something that, yeah, it's something I be thinking about. We would love to hear about sort of how 1006 came to be, which is basically like this community space where that vision was born out of, and why it's important, especially for your community. And I mean, your community within proximity to you, because from what I can see, there's a lot of like, just like the programming and stuff seems to be centered on that space, on people in that area, which I think is really important. Because a lot of these sort of, what do they call them, third spaces, they don't really exist the way they used to back in the day, especially for Black people, especially for young people. So yeah, I'm really interested in sort of the vision behind that.
Before I go into that, I do just want to mention I also, for my approach to Reiki, to a really formative text for me is Tony K. Bambara's The Salt Eaters, and just the experience that, that the healer has trying to heal Velma. And it is something I always, reference that book a lot of times when people come. Like I try to, like, I'm a very like practical person too. So I try to bring in practical tools, that for folks, and reference things too, to just let people know, like, you're not the first person in the world that has experienced this. Like there is, you know, y'all, we all kind of have these things that we're going through. So I just wanted to shout out that book because I'm always referencing it in sessions, or when I'm talking about it. But 1006, oh Lord. So 1006 is, I've described it so many different ways. The way that I even knew about the space physically is because one of my closest friends had operated a clothing boutique out of the space for like a decade and some change. And she had been wrestling with over the years, like, okay, I think I'm ready to let it go. No, I'm not ready to let it go. I think I'm ready to let it go. I'm not ready to let it go. And it got to a point where it was like, okay, yes, this is absolutely a decision that is happening. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I found myself saying to her, it just kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, I think I might be interested in doing something in this space. And my friend has opened her doors to meet other community members to do things in there the whole time she's been open. So it was not like I never had access to the space, because I have done some events in there. But for some reason, something just was on my spirit. And before I knew it, I had said, hey, girl, I might be interested, if this other situation doesn't work out. And I said that to her like maybe a week or so. She was like, yeah, well, the other thing is not going to work out. So what you trying to do? And I was like, how soon do you need to know? Because I was like, I was talking all of that. And then it was just like, oh, I don't know about this. Then I ran the numbers, and I just felt like financially, I was like, I think I could figure this out. Like I will be willing to take the risk to do this, to be in this space. So like 1006, the interesting thing is like a storefront, right? So in that way, it's really funny because I think even like culturally, it's like sometimes it's like it feels like old school like storefront church. It also is like, it feels like a used black bookstore, you know. it feels like a lot of different things depending on what we're doing in this space. It's not even a terribly large space, but I was okay with that because I felt like I wanted a space to try out these ideas. I wanted a space to just say, hey, does community want to come here on a regular basis and do um Black events, things that center Black culture, like collective learning, curiosity, and creativity. But I also wanted it to be multi-generational. Um, because that's been, like, I would say, as a baby poet, that's post Black arts movement, I learned a lot from elder Black poets, and I just thought that it would be really nice to have a space to where young people, medium middle aged people like myself, and then elders could come together and learn and teach each other. So that's how 1006 came to be. We are, like, I guess technically entering into we've been in the space for a full year, so we technically are entering into like our second year, I think is how you kind of do the math. I live in Chocolate City. I live in Harrisburg. I call us the little chocolate city that tries. And I think for the number of Black folks and brown folks that we have in this city, I wanted a place that you can at least walk by the window and always see something Black. Like, walk by the window and always see some sort of Black culture that is represented, right? Like, we don't have like an African American museum. There's not even, I mean, to be quite frank, there is not a, like, of course, Black folks, we take culture wherever we go, right? So I'm not saying that it's just confined to a building or an institution. But hell, when everybody else got buildings and institutions, like, it is nice to just see our culture on display. It's nice to just be like, oh wow, like, look at this first print edition of this Black book. To me, it's just nice to be able to do that in the space. We're also like a micro art gallery, right? So I have like featured artists sometimes, and so I'm trying to expand that offering more. Like, I like to have more like artists that are featured, that we can have a pipeline to be able to move their work out into the world. We've done creative workshops. I want to, continue that. It's just, the reality is, I recognize the limitations of trying to do everything. And I know that I can't obviously do everything at once. Whatever I give my attention, it grows, but I can't give everything my equal attention all the time. So I hope that more people will want to connect to and try out their things in the space, and want to collaborate, or sometimes just like use the space, like not even just having to collaborate like, oh, 1006 has have a stamp or have any input in this, but just people wanting to try out things in the space. So that's a little bit how we get to 1006. I believe I'm committed at least through the end of this year, and then we'll see. I put out the 2025 Black Mermaids calendar, and it's like leaving space for the manifestation of miracles. And I don't just say these things, like, I really believe them. Like, you have to put yourself on. You have to build the things that you want to see in the world. I think it's so easy to always be like, oh, we ain't got this, we ain't got that. I mean, who's supposed to come along and do it? Like, who's supposed to come along and create the things that you want to see? So even in my own way, if I'm saying that I would like to see more Black cultural events that are just not rooted in nightlife, then who else is going to come and do it? This is just my attempt at trying it out and seeing what sticks, or even how it introduces a vision for what is possible. So whether it happens at 1006 or it happens outside of those doors, it is just trying to show that the work, I think, is important. And our latest offering, which it's called Soul Salon, and it's taking two Black icons that have the same birthday, and we put their work side by side in the room and just kind of see what type of engagement, interactivity, and conversation happens when when that work is in the space. So the first one was Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison, who share a birthday, and then we're going to be doing one for Toni K. Bambara and Aretha Franklin, who also share a birthday. So I'm really excited about that one, because Aretha Franklin was a very private person. Like, she was not a yapper. I think mostly the way that we're going to continue to know her is through her music, right? But it'll be interesting to see how people bring their own feelings about Aretha. I know my audience, the folks that are becoming a 1006, they will know Toni K. Bambara a lot less than they know Aretha Franklin. So I'm excited to also introduce Toni K. Bambara to to more folks as well. And then really excited for May's, because May 19th, Lorraine Hansberry and Malcolm X share a birthday. And so it'll be Malcolm X's 100th birthday. So I'm sure, we're going to do something the whole day to commemorate that occasion. And then, put in Lorraine Hansberry and Malcolm X's work in creative life. Both of them died, tragically very young, in their 30s. So it is going to be interesting to even just see, like, damn, like, Black genius, like, but how it continues to also connect with us and build our lives across space and time. So 1006 is the physical, like, all these ideas that I have that just can't live on the internet. Some stuff, I just want to be in the room with people.
Just a small thing about taking initiative, because yes, that's one of my pet peeves about the internet and people who always jumping in the comments or saying stuff about like Black people don't do this or we don't have this and why do they get to have this but we don't. And it's like sometimes it's okay to like say this is something I want to see. What might it look like for me to create this thing, and where can I find support? Because it's not easy. Like, there's stuff that I want to see, and I'm like I don't have the resources to do that. So I'm gonna wait. Somebody probably doing it, or somebody probably gonna do it. But like I feel like there's always critique specifically of the community within the community about what people not doing. And sometimes it's like you just not paying attention is the other thing. Because a lot of people do decide, like, having that community space is so important. And I would love something like that. And I do think it's important. And I do think we don't have a lot of those spaces for a lot of reasons. They pricing out people, they pricing out businesses, even here in Durham, that have been here decades. I've seen stuff like about people having to close. So it's like, there's limitations, but like how can we, one thing that's been coming up a lot for me is like what does the past have to teach us, because we are going through like another, shout out to my grandma, she don't even be knowing, basically we're going through another cycle of like this sort of attempt to repress progress. So much change is happening, and it's been happening so rapidly, especially for Black folks and queer folks and that kind of thing, then now there's another rise to this, like, we got to crush this, just like they did when slavery was emancipated, just like they did when Black people finally started getting these yeses from the courts to give them the right to vote and the right to like not be discriminated on jobs. So like, what were they doing? Because they was working against a lot. Not saying we not, but I really try to remind myself the conditions in which our ancestors and and a lot of these people that we look up to, they was working under some conditions that we not at this time. Like FBI following and harassing regular citizens. I mean, they doing it now slowly, but it was just a lot of things happening that right now we're at a place where it's like we got some flexibility to really figure out strategies that are like relevant for today but pull from the past, if that makes sense. And so that's what that brought up for me. Again, here I go, me and my tangents that ain't got nothing to do with anything, but yeah, that's all.
It's all connected for sure. And I mean, to your point, I mean, that's exactly one of the things that I'm also, hoping that we do at 1006 is, where is the collective learning? A couple things I want to say. One, I think a lot of folks are very well intentioned and good people when they out here trying to respond to these times, like especially in a city like mine that is economically depressed, really doing the best that they can. But also, is there additional opportunities for us to really understand how we arrive in these conditions? And that's some of the work that I'm trying to do at 1006, like for the collective learning. The study circle that I'm trying to grow is called Subject to Change, and we use a variety of materials to talk about the main topics and things that are affecting our lives today. So yesterday was a kicked off using this film, and the film is talking about imperialism, fascism, dissent, all those big words that have everyday consequences for us. And I thought it would be easier, instead of just reading a book or a text, it would be easier to just watch it on a film, right, with some historical context. Because when we watched the film, it was like, oh my gosh, it was just weird, like literally seeing the same type of signs that people have outside in protest today. So I think it's all of that is absolutely relevant when it comes to critique, and people are like, ain't nobody doing this. I will say the internet, internet obviously has its good with its bad. And that is one of the bad parts of it. That people who would not even be in the field, who don't even care about certain things too, can just find things and just say, oh, this is bad. You haven't even read it. You haven't even touched it. You haven't even looked at it. Or you didn't even care about it before. And now the internet, I'm guilty of that too. And I do, like, a lot of times I reclaim my attention span, because I'm like, girl, did you care about this before? You didn't. Why do you have an opinion about it now? Just because it's in your face, you don't have to comment. But the other side about it is, we do be like, oh, nobody's doing X. And as a person who is very much into Black independent cinema, people are always like, oh, there ain't no Black movies, only do this. And it's just like, child, Black filmmakers out here making all types of movies. And then studying the history, I'm like, Black filmmakers been making all types of movies. Like, this ain't nothing new. Like, Black folks been pushing the envelope and making all different types of stylistic films. But because we don't immediately see them or have access to them, we think it does not exist. So, yeah, I think all of that absolutely ties into the work that's trying to happen at 10:06. Like, that's why the tangible, touch it, and come and be in a space to be like, sure, complain, critique, but let's also do it in community so we remember how to talk to each other. I don't mind a good debate. I don't mind a good argument. I don't mind, pulling out the words and the quotes and I don't mind that, but I do not enjoy doing it online. And I had to remind myself that it's like, oh no, I have tons of things to say, but do I just want to? Sometimes I'm like, you typing it. I mean, I know this person now. I'm going too hard. It's just too much. And I just like, oh no, I want to be in a room with people. So I could realize when I see in your eyes that there's understanding, I don't got to keep going in. Or when I see that you just never going to care, I don't have to keep going in. Like, just bringing back that way of engaging with each other, and also what it's like to talk. Like, what people say, talk to me like you got some sense, right? Because we also know, you watch the way people talk to each other, the way they would never talk to people if they were in person. Like, y'all be talking wild just because we not in the same room. And it's just like, y'all, let's dial it back a little bit.
Losing the plot.
This reminds me when you, Dani, you were like, some people need to be whooped.
No, listen, growing up in the South, the kids picking up guns now, but like, back in the day, people used to just go out in the front yard and fight until Big Mama came out and told everybody to sit down, like, and get cursed out or whatever. But sometimes you needed that. We sit down and everybody talk about it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people, I really do. I know it's problematic, but I'm just like, some of y'all, this whole getting on the internet and saying the most outrageous, hateful thing that you would never have the guts to say to people, just hateful.
Yeah, you just don't know what it's like. It also tells me that I feel like maybe you never really say those things, or have never tried out saying those things, because to just say those things and never know what it's like for somebody to kind of like roll up on you, like even just the threat of like, oh no, absolutely not. It shows, and with this freedom of speech, but like everything costs. Like,
listen, they ain't got the back. I don't support whooping kids for real, but hey, they ain't got the backhand in the mouth before, and I just gotta say, it's made something of a difference for me. Okay, I be watching what I'm saying, because it's been many a times that I got too cute with my mama and my grandma, and before I knew it, it's so fast. So it happens so fast, and that's what I think some people need. Adults, not children. But I'm saying it did make a difference for me because I watch what I say to people.
I just was raised in a way that like my mama was real old school Southern, and like even respectfully, you just don't question, right? Which is not good. But my dad was more like, oh, you can say what you want to say, but you have to say it respectful. So I think I always learned too, like you said, watch what you have to say. And then as I got older, I was like, also talk to people like you got good sense. Like also make good sense when you're talking to people. And so that's what I also learned. But it like definitely being with kids and growing up, you knew you can't just be saying any old thing. Folk don't play that. So whether even if it's just a social consequence of people don't want to be around you because you're not kind, or like on the highbrow end is just like, oh, you're mean, we don't want to hang with you. To the other end is like, yeah, yeah, but you won't say that again, type of energy.
This is our last question, and there was this talk that I saw Toni Morrison did. I don't remember where or when it was, but I do remember her saying that poor people are creative because they have to be. And it reminded me of like when me and Dani, we've talked a lot about what it's like growing up in Mississippi and how you have to dream and you have to be imaginative and you have to be creative and resourceful to just survive because our government hates us, right? But I think about the time we live in now and a lot of people who talk about being stuck. But like Toni Morrison said, creativity is the answer and it will require our dreaming and our resourcefulness just to survive right now. So this is an open-ended question for both of y'all. Is there anything that you want to say about the necessity of creativity in today's world beyond just what we think about as creativity?
So I love the framing, the way that you opened up the question, because one of my biggest pet peeves is how people always make it seem like when you're poor that you ain't thinking about nothing else. It's just all survival when you can't be creative and you're not thinking about creativity because you only thinking about your immediate needs. And I think that just kind of creates this idea of who gets to be creative, and then also who gets to be rewarded for their creativity. And then how do we also place value on people's creativity when it gets to be seen as kind of this very self-indulgent reality versus it was done out of survival. And so I always have a problem with that. I'm like, I mean, and I get it. Everybody's talking about how it is rough sometimes getting to our creative projects because we have like jobs and all these other things that are stressing us out. But that doesn't mean that we're not creative, right? We are absolutely thinking about our creativity. We just maybe can't bring it all through at the same time or in this season. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So to me, the creative necessity, it opens up our world, right? Like when I'm in peak creative mode, I think it also is just like I'm better at problem solving. I just feel like I'm better at life. So I think any opportunity that gets adults to be able to tap into that. That's why like even like from a real practical everyday way, I've noticed there's certain events that have like got really popular. Like people like to do the wine and sips and things like that because they want to unlock their creativity. They want to be able to do something, even if it's not a consistent hobby or a career for them. People want to touch the material. And I think that that's why it's so important for us to have those everyday ways to do it. That's why I'm trying to do what I'm doing at 10:06, just to remind people even creative power. Again, even if people are not making a career out of a particular type of creativity, but we literally need creativity for everything, right? And I think that is why we also notice when people, like what Toni Morrison say something like, like evil is so easy, right? Evil is so easy. That's why even I think when parents are disciplining kids, it's so easy to sometimes to just hit the kid and not have to like go through like all the things that it requires to get the kid to understand without physical punishment, right? So creativity is the thing that really I think unlocks our fullest potential. And people are bringing that, whether they cooking food, whether they doing hair, whether they trying to figure out how not to cuss people out, or they're trying to figure out how to cuss people out. Like there's all these different creativity. Like we just need it. Oh, and what Maya Angelou say? You can't use it up. Like it ain't a thing that can be used up. It just we keep generating it when we get to tap into it. And I think even when people are not doing like art like with the capital A. You know, I think that's the difference between, like I was opening up saying, like there's just between making art and making a life. And I think our creative necessity is really what determines if we actually have made a life.
I love that. And I wanted to add super short because I know we running up on the time, but one thing that I always, and I'm sure, I know other people have said this, I'm pretty sure Toni Morrison has said this a lot, like the oppressor, the people that seek to oppress us, they are so unimaginative. There's nothing creative about what they do. It's very kind of what you said. It's evil is easy, it's boring, to be honest. So one thing that I always think about with creativity is us making it a point to be more creative than our oppressor. And we can. It's not that hard to be. And I have to tell myself that because sometimes I get into the mode where I'm like, I feel hateful, I feel rage, and I feel like I want bad things to happen to these people. Sometimes the people that ain't even oppressing me, people who are just like feeding into it, who will ultimately be hurt alongside me. It's like, it's not to say like, oh, they don't deserve it. I still feel like they do deserve it. But some people can be redeemed, and like, there's nothing useful or creative or imaginative about me wishing harm on these people or me going out of my way to harm these people, if I don't have to. So, yeah, just thinking about that in the context of my living, how can my creativity really sort of resist, and not in like the whole everything about it is about resisting a man, but no, how can my creativity in the life I live really like be a repellent to the repression that is trying to crush me?
For me, my final thoughts. Thank you, Julia, for coming. It is so great to speak with you again.
I love talking with y'all. Thank you for having me, truly.
Yes, thank you so much for speaking with us. Thank you so much for like always being open to like support us and even support me when I be jumping into your DMs with me and my drama with, oh, I can't write, whatever. It means a lot because it just means a lot too to have people that I could process this with, because I got my friends, I got my my close friends. They don't care about this. Like, they support me, but like, girl, we don't know what you talking about, but we gonna read it, or we gonna share it or whatever. But so it's really nice to have just like an eclectic community of folks and friends that I can just go to and say, like, I really need to process this with somebody. And so I really appreciate you for being that support system for me, and just like, yeah, and being in community with us. It's we met so many people because of this podcast, and so it's just really been a blessing. Yeah. So that's my final thoughts.
I don't know. I always just love talking to y'all. I think I'm always going to champion Black folks taking responsibility for their creative urges. And I love being in community and connection with y'all. It's been incredible to witness y'all continued evolution. And I just love everything that the podcast represents. And so thank y'all for considering me to be a valued member of y'all community. I really appreciate it.
So, if you like this episode, you can like, rate, and review Hoodoo Plant Mamas on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If anything from the show resonated with you, make sure to share it with us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.